People in northern Wisconsin don't talk about the disappearances unless you force the conversation. And even then their voices drop into a whisper. They'll tell you the forest took those 3 people. Not a person or an animal, but the forest itself. I used to think that was just superstition. Until I went there myself. The first disappearance happened 26 years ago, when a pair of brothers went hiking on the northern trailhead. The trail wasn't considered dangerous back then, just quiet and heavily wooded. They never returned and the search teams never found a single clue. The third disappearance happened 12 years later, when a college student named Emily Parker vanished during a solo photography trip. Her car was found at the entrance of the trail, camera bag still inside. Her footprints went in but none came out. The forest where they vanished isn't remote in the usual sense. It sits just outside a small Wisconsin town, surrounded by county roads and farmland. But once you cross the tree line, the atmosphere changes instantly. Locals say you don't walk into those woods, you step into something else, something that feels older than the land itself, something that watches. I went there because I had already filmed Wisconsin's haunted bridges, abandoned trails, and strange lakes, and I thought this would be just another eerie location. But the disappearances bothered me. I wanted to understand why the townspeople spoke about this forest like it was alive. When I parked at the trailhead, the place looked harmless. Maple leaves scattered across the ground in bright reds and yellows, and rays of sunlight filtered through tall pines. Nothing about the forest suggested danger, but the air felt different the moment I stepped out of the car. The breeze died instantly, like I had walked into a sealed room. The silence was thick enough to feel on my skin. I stood at the entrance of the trail, looking at the small wooden sign that marked the path. It didn't look sinister, just weathered, cracked, and sun-faded. But the gap between the trees felt like a mouth waiting for me. My camera was already recording as I stepped inside. The ground was soft with years of fallen needles and leaves, and the canopy above filtered the light into a dim, green glow. My footsteps seemed too loud in the heavy quiet. I walked for 10 minutes before realizing I couldn't hear any birds. No insects. No rustling. Just the sound of my own breathing. It felt like the forest had swallowed every noise. I reminded myself that heavy forests often create pockets of silence. But this wasn't natural, it felt intentional. As though the trees leaned slightly closer the deeper I walked. The trail twisted slowly, like something trying to lead me somewhere specific. My GPS couldn't get a signal, but I wasn't worried at first. I had marked the entrance and planned to follow the ribbon of the path. Then I noticed something strange on the ground, a single shoe lying in the leaves. It was old, faded, and covered with moss. My pulse jumped when I realized it matched the description of a shoe Emily Parker had been wearing. I leaned down slowly, touching it with the edge of my glove. It wasn't just aged, it looked chewed around the edges. Something had torn the back of it like an animal, but no animal in Wisconsin could leave marks that deep. I stood up fast, suddenly aware of how alone I was in the strange stillness. The woods behind me felt darker than before. I forced myself to keep walking. The deeper I went, the more the trail seemed to change beneath my feet. The dirt shifted to soft soil, then to patches of bare ground, then to moss-covered stones. The path no longer felt like a human-made trail. It felt ancient. 30 minutes in, I found the first circle of stones. They were arranged intentionally, perfectly, each one smoothed and placed like symbols. The center of the circle was bare dirt, untouched by leaves. I stepped backward slowly, feeling my heartbeat thud in my ears. No search report had ever mentioned ritual circles or stone cairns. Whatever these were, they weren't natural formations. My camera picked up a sound then, a faint clicking noise coming from deeper in the woods. The sound was rhythmic, like something tapping on wood. I froze, listening. Click. Click. It grew slightly louder, as if something was coming closer but still hidden. I aimed my flashlight into the dark underbrush, but the beam seemed swallowed by the trees. I whispered, "Hello," even though I knew I shouldn't have. The clicking stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt alive, pressing against my ears like cotton. I turned slowly, scanning both sides of the trail. Nothing moved, but the air had shifted, colder, heavier. I walked faster now, not wanting to turn back but terrified of going forward. The trail bent sharply, and as I rounded the curve, something caught my eye, a scrap of blue fabric on a low branch. I recognized it immediately from the missing persons bulletin. It was the shoulder piece of the jacket Emily Parker had been wearing in her last photograph. The color was faded but not degraded enough for 12 years. It looked fresh. My breathing turned shallow as I reached out to touch it. The fabric was cold, colder than the surrounding air, as if it had been placed there recently. Goosebumps rose across my arms. A deep crack echoed from somewhere behind me. It wasn't the sound of a twig snapping, it was the sound of something large stepping on a branch. I spun around, lifting the camera toward the noise. My lens captured nothing but dense trees, yet I could feel eyes on me. I backed away slowly, heart racing, unsure of which direction would take me out of the woods. The trail felt distorted, looping in ways that didn't match my memory. Every tree looked identical. Then the whispers began. They were faint at first, drifting between the trunks like wind, except there was no wind. The voices weren't speaking words I could understand. They were layered, overlapping, rising and falling like a chant. The forest seemed to breathe with them. I turned and ran. Branches whipped at my arms as I tore through the trail, trying to follow my own footprints. But the leaves had shifted, the ground looked undisturbed, as though the forest had erased my path. The whispers grew louder behind me. My foot caught on something, sending me sprawling face first into the dirt. Pain shot through my knee, but I forced myself up and looked back. A stone circle stood behind me, not the same one I had passed earlier. This one was bigger. The stones were taller, arranged in a perfect ring, and in the middle of them, no, I couldn't be seeing that. 3 shallow depressions lay in the dirt, shaped exactly like bodies had been lying there. I stumbled backward, choking on fear when the clicking sound came again from the trees. This time it was closer, almost beside me. The shadows between the trunks thickened, bending into a shape, something tall. Something wrong. I didn't stay long enough to see it fully form. I ran harder, lungs burning. Blinking tears from my eyes as the whispers twisted into a low moan that echoed through the forest. The temperature plunged, chilling the sweat on my neck. My flashlight flickered violently. Up ahead, I saw something, a faint beam of daylight breaking through the trees. I sprinted toward it, crashing through brush and low branches. Behind me, the chanting grew frantic. I burst through the tree line and stumbled onto the gravel road. My legs gave out, and I collapsed on the ground, gasping like I had been drowning. The forest behind me was silent again, still, dark and watching. I crawled to my car and fumbled with shaking hands for the keys. As I pulled away, I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror. I didn't see anything following me, but the tree line seemed to pulse with shadow. Back in town, I showed the sheriff my footage. He watched it quietly, jaw clenched, sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool room. When the video ended, he turned it off without a word. After a long silence, he said, "This is why we tell people not to go there. The forest doesn't give everyone back." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and said I should delete the footage, forget what I saw, and never go near that trail again. I didn't delete it, but I wish I could forget. Sometimes, late at night, when my house is quiet and the darkness presses close, I hear that same clicking sound coming from somewhere in the walls, and when I close my eyes, I see the stone circle again, waiting for a fourth body.